Welcome to Flyover Conservative Podcast with David and Stacy Whited, where we break down current events and examine culture through the lens of conservative Christian values.
Some things age better than others, and one of them is writer Ayn Rand. If you ever read Atlas Shrugged, or definitely encourage you to read it, not watch the movies. There's some old interviews even where Ayn Rand was on Phil Donahue. Kind of dates me a little bit. I remember those being on, and I've played those for our kids now, where she's saying things that sounded so like ludicrous of where we were headed as a country, some of the policies and things that were there, and her ability to wrap her language around things as they evolved and almost be prophetic in the understanding. But it's kind of like if you see somebody that doesn't water their grass and it's in the summer, it's like I can predict it's going to die.
Right, it is going to be brown.
It doesn't mean that you're the greatest expert in the whole world. If you know, you know. And sometimes in the moment, people tend to miss this. I'm going to read a quote of hers. This was from 1957. When you see that in order to produce, you need to obtain permission from men who produce nothing. When you see the money is flowing to those who deal, not in goods, but in favors. When you see that men get richer by graft and by pull than by work, and your laws don't protect you against them, but protect them against you. When you see corruption being rewarded, and honesty becoming a self-sacrifice, you may know that your society is doomed. Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, 1957. That sounds a lot like the world. It sounds a lot like America. And it sounds specifically a lot like the policymakers that have had a stranglehold on the state of California for some time. Fox News is doing a good job doing some of the heavy lifting of bringing attention to this. Trace Gallagher had on a special guest recently. Hit some of these numbers real quick. Let me play this clip.
He writes the following. Here's the headline. The Vice President J.D. Vance Anti-Fraud Task Force suspends 447 hospices in Los Angeles over more than $600 million in suspected fraud. Gavin Newsom's office responds like they always respond, which is this. Given Medicare is 80% of the hospice market, we're glad to see the federal government is finally fighting fraud in their programs. Forget about the California angle on this. This is all the federal government's fault. They should have been looking for this for a long time. California, we don't look for federal money.
Gavin Newsom flip-flops every week on this.
Of course he does.
2 weeks ago, it's the federal government's job. Last week, when Rob Bonta came out, he said, thank God for us, we stopped hospices. By the way, he shut down 10 hospice locations in Los Angeles. But now, this week, President Trump once again has to come into California to do Gavin Newsom's job. Not only is he unfit to become president of the United States, he's not even a good governor of California.
I love it. Jenny Ray LaRue is a doer. She is a CEO. Kind of makes her stand out a little bit. We've had a lot of shows. Bill Walton recently, and it's almost synonymous. People that are in charge are typically not doers. It sort of attracts a class that wants to kind of hang out, go to dinner parties, and fight for power and not move the needle. She's the exact.
So it really stands out when you have somebody like a Jenny Ray or a Bill Walton that you're like, oh my gosh, they are doers, and they could potentially, move the dial in our country.
I love it. She's a believer. She's director of Cal DOGE. Kind of show you where I'm at on DOGE today.
Got your DOGE shirt on.
Got my DOGE shirt on. I'm all about that. It seems like the most low-hanging fruit we could possibly go after. I don't know why media runs cover for it so much against it. She's running for Congress to flip an Orange County seat from blue to red, and she kind of has the inside scoop on both sides of the curtain of what happened in California and what is going on there on all things political and fraud. Miss Jenny Ray LaRue.
Yay! Welcome back.
It's so good to be with y'all, and I just could talk about how great California could be all day and where we are and how we're going to get there. So I'm really excited to be on the show with you today. I think my ultimate goal, as everyone is listening, is just to share some hope. That was what I took away when I got involved into politics. The Lord promised me that this would cost me everything. And I said, yes, let's do it. It's worth it for a generation and a nation. And so I'm really excited to get into the details of that today. But I hope that for those of you who have left California, for those of you who are in California and thinking about leaving, that you will understand the fight that we're going through right now and how we're going to win it.
I love that. And I truly believe that. Every week I do something called the prophetic report where we go through, what is God saying? We can see what's all over the news. We can kind of see what's in the natural, but what is God actually saying? And there are so many words about California, revival, restoration, that will actually sweep across our country. So we are excited that you are there and truly holding on to prophetic words that have been spoken over California and over our country.
Well, just so that y'all know, I was a nonpartisan candidate, a believer who was apolitical, and I thought that was the right way to be for a long season of my life. And in 2020, on the night of the election, I had it was like a dreamlike visiony thing, right? But it was kind of like a night dream that I woke up from, and it kind of still kept playing out. But it was the country moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, and it was being covered in blue, like painted blue.
Wow.
And of course, we know that the election wasn't called on election night, but it was called a few days later. And so I felt like I had this understanding of what was going to happen for that. But what I saw, just to tie into your words, Stacey, after that was that there was this period of time where we were working the ground. And then from the West Coast to the East Coast, the country was painted red. And I do believe that there is an opportunity right now to make a change in California that will be for generations. I don't subscribe to the belief that California is a blue state. I think that currently the state often votes blue. I don't even think it's as dramatic as being a blue state. But I also think that we are at an opportunity right now to make a huge difference in how we vote and what that means, not just in California, but for Congress and beyond.
I could not agree more. Back in, I think it was September of 2020, I helped a friend move from Redding, California to Dallas, Texas. And she had an RV, so we were actually driving her RV. That was quite an adventure, the two of us.
Neither one of them had ever driven an RV, so that could have been a little reality show.
So, you're going from Northern California all the way down and then across, to Texas. And it was so crazy because obviously the 2020 election was coming up. We couldn't believe how many in California that we would see all of these signs for President Trump, and very few. I've looking back on that, I think we saw 2 for Biden that whole time. And so I come into agreement that it is not as blue as most people think. We saw red after red after red, and definitely believing that for that state.
There's more registered Republicans in the state of California than any state in America.
That should tell you something.
Yep.
And a lot of the numbers that are cited are misleading. This is one of the things that we'll talk about when we get to DOGE, that data can lie and data can tell the truth, and it's our job to get to the truth. But a lot of people will say, hey, there are twice as many registered Democrats in California as there are registered Republicans. And what most people hear when they think that is that the state is 66% Democrat and 33% Republican. What we actually just have are a ton of cowards. And I can say that because I was one of them. Because when you tally up the votes of our statewide races, we are a 55, 54, 53, 45, 46, 47 state. And what that means is that a lot of people who are registered outside of the party, who are registered no party preference voters, are voting conservative but unwilling to identify as conservatives. And I was afraid of that. I was desperately afraid of that. I ran a business in California. We sold to universities and to left-leaning or left-oriented organizations where I knew a lot of the people in leadership were not politically aligned with me. And I was terrified of being outed as a conservative. And you know what? Ever since I came out and said, actually, I'm a Republican, this is what I think, I've both found a ton of friends, but also that courage is rewarded no matter what it is that you believe. And so even on the business side, my business has flourished because I'm just really clear about who I am and the fact that it will not dictate who I work with or how we operate. There's nothing that's changed, but that just something that I'm encouraging a lot of people in California to find. I think it's part of what will make change in our state.
I love that. That is so, so good. That's exciting.
Let's jump into some of these numbers because people hear these things. It's become quite popular. Nick Shirley, there's so many people that have brought attention, to this. And it's one of these where every time it comes to elections, like on our national elections, we had Hillary, we had Biden, we had Harris. I get nervous sometimes they're going to run somebody like Shapiro from Pennsylvania that makes sense, because when you hear him talk, it's like, oh, this is he comes across like a regular person that you could actually have a conversation with that is a doer. They don't tend to go with characters like that. They want the Tim Walzes and the craziness, and you tend to move ahead in those ranks. Sometimes I used to really think, how do these guys get promoted when they perform so low? But there tends to be this massive compromise and kind of in on the take, and those are ones they know they can kind of control and move. So you end up with these like Gavin Newsom kind of people that, like, if he ends up being a head-to-head competitor in the next election, you're like, that's an easy guy to campaign against because he's walking low-hanging fruit to throw rocks at, with them. And there's so much fraud. We've seen it in Minnesota, but California seems to be even more. Let's talk specifically about, maybe jump in on the hospice cases and what we're seeing there, because kind of like education was in Minnesota with the Leering centers and the things going on there, the hospice fraud, we've seen clips with people driving around and there's 100 these kind of things of hospice care centers in one little building, and there's like no patients. And you see these things like, how is that possible that they could hide that amount of fraud? But it's like they're not really hiding it.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about hospice specifically. It's not super unusual that you would have a hospice office without patients. A lot of hospice patients don't go into the office.
Right.
What is unusual is to have a hospice office without phone calls or traffic. That's a pretty big problem. And it's a huge problem when those hospices are actually found to not be billing for patients that are on hospice or eligible for hospice. And I've got not just the data that we've already seen, but a couple of anecdotes to share about this. So hospice in particular is really interesting. Hospices are licensed by the state of California. So it is a California issue. Hospice oversight is conducted from the state of California. Hospice money is paid via the state of California to the hospice organizations from federal dollars. So when you see fraud at the scale that we're seeing it in this hospice provider network in California, it actually is coming straight out of your pocket. It's coming straight out of every American's pocket. And where does the oversight fall? It falls on both sides. It falls both on the federal government when they're getting billed to figure out where that billing is broken down. It also falls in the state of California. If anybody had ever just gone to some of these hospices, it's pretty obvious that they aren't real. And it's also very clear and evident. That's really where a lot of the change that needs to happen is that, once you issue a license, if somebody operates for 10 years, bills millions of dollars and never actually has a hospice patient, or has, for example, a 90% recovery rate, a miraculous recovery rate from hospice.
Wow, that's amazing.
These things need to be caught in the data and they need to be pursued. And one of the craziest things about the hospice story is that the state auditor in the state of California for years has been pointing this out as an issue. And there has been no political will for anybody to get out of their office, drive over to a hospice provider and figure out what's actually going on. And so last week, when JD Vance and the Anti-Fraud Task Force removed these 447 licenses, which basically means that they suspend payment to these organizations, that happened midweek. By the end of the week, Dr. Oz came out and said 0 of them had contacted him to say, hey, you shouldn't have shut us down.
Wow.
Isn't that astonishing?
0%.
0%. Not one of them had called and said, hey, you might have an error here. We can explain. Here's what's actually going on. And so when these organizations are actually, when the oversight is happening, the fraud is discontinued immediately. money. And that's what I think should be really encouraging for folks, because the right amount of fraud in a state is zero, right? Zero fraudsters, $0, zero organizations that are billing people in, for example, the Midwest. By the way, if you are 40 and healthy, your social security number could have been billed from one of these fraudsters in California. Wow. Who bought it from the black market and has been billing for 6 or 8 or 12 months Medicare on your behalf. So when you go to subscribe for a hospice later in life, they're going to say, sorry, you've already used up your hospice benefit. And that kind of racket.
Wow.
Why is this different than robbing banks? You know, like if
it's not.
Let's say California.
Mm-hmm.
In California, you can rob a bank and the media is going to cover for you, and they're going to pass a law saying you can't do stories about it. You know, I mean, it's stealing money.
It's stealing money. And so I'll talk in just a second, David, about the way that the money flows usually work. Hospice has not always been in this system, but there are definitely situations where as the money flows, it heads straight back up to the people who wrote the checks in the first place. This is actually just organized crime is really what this hospice issue was. And it's perpetrated in a society that spent 150,000 hours in 9 months last year frivolously suing President Trump and the federal government to score political points. They wanted to preserve things like gender transition for minors in California. And so that's what that 150,000 hours, approximately $40 million in 9 months, was spent on from our California State Department of Justice. Were they finding fraud? They were not. Were they prosecuting any of these auditor reports? They were not. None of these issues were actually being pursued by the state DOJ. And so, every DOJ, the US DOJ, as well as state DOJs, have to make choices about what kind of crimes they will actually pursue and punish. And those choices impact how many criminals you have operating in your state, right? And so California has been lawless because their focus has been on scoring political points, living in an echo chamber in the, super majority driven Sacramento swamp. And that focus has led them not to actually be connected at all to what people on the ground want. And you know what? This is not a Republican issue. Democrats actually don't want fraud either. They don't want fraud in their programs. They don't want fraud in their communities. It's not fair for these fraudsters to rob a bank, effectively the federal government's bank, and get rich off of it. And so this is an incredibly bipartisan issue, and the politicians have been incredibly disconnected from it.
So why California? I was just going back on this X that Colton had up earlier, where it says LA County has about 1,800 hospices, which is 6 times the national average, with 1,500% growth rate since 2010. 700 of the hospices trigger multiple fraud red flags, and 89 to 197 are registered at single addresses. The average billing per patient is $29,000, which is double the national average of $13,000. At least $3.5 billion is suspected in LA alone. 18% of U.S. hospice billing is from only one county, Los Angeles. Can you talk about that? Why California? Why Los Angeles?
Well, criminals hang out in networks. Nick actually, in his video, pointed out that there are not just hospices, but there are actually hospice consulting agencies that will help you open a hospice. And we often find that in communities, there are people who are kind of like, hey, here's a good gig. You should get in on it. Wow. And so like I said, this is an organized crime ring. This is friends and family members that have figured out where the open checkbook was, and they have been cashing those checks. And so Los Angeles, again, it's very convenient. When I ran for governor in 2022 against Gavin Newsom, one of the questions I asked on homelessness was, I would ask homeless people, who have you seen from the government? They say they're spending all of this money. How often do they come talk to you? What do they offer? The majority of them said zero had ever had contact with anyone from the government. So I immediately started to ask questions like, where is the money going?
Yeah.
And it turns out we have an entire homeless fraud complex. We call it the homeless industrial complex. that sits in their offices. They don't actually provide services to the federal government. So our money, $24 billion of money, not just little dollars, but big, big dollars, have gone to funding these offices and the people sitting in the offices and making plans and pushing paper. It is a bureaucratic infrastructure that has no focus on oversight. And with no oversight from the state level and no oversight from the county level, right? If you guys just left your house with teenage kids for 5 years, what do you think they would do? Would you come back to an organized house and books that were managed and, prosperity in your home, right? Like this is nuts just for them to think that people are going to do the right thing. And we're finding this across the board. We're actually investigating an organization right now. But the state of California's practices are such a problem for this. They drop $100 million into this organization's bank account on July 1st. And they require zero reporting after that.
100 million with zero reporting.
Wait, what business
$100
doesn't
million
require like an
zero.
expense report? You send one of your
You
employees.
want me to send you the application for this, right?
I know.
If you work for a company and you take a trip, you come back and hey, it cost me $10,000 for my hotel. You'd be like, can we have some receipts for this? Why, there's no business that could run like this. And then when the government doesn't make anything, they don't produce anything. The only way they have money is by demoralizing people that actually get up on Monday when they don't feel like it and go to work and do the work and then pay their taxes. Those are the people that are funding this, and it's infuriating to the people who play by the rules. It's like, well, I should be an illegal immigrant. I'll come in, I'll get more stuff. If I have insurance and I'm doing the right stuff, it's going to cost me more than if I don't. Like everybody who plays by the rules is penalized, and the people who cut the corners and have these little side hustles are rewarded. And eventually people are going to stop participating. If you have 3 kids and one of them does the dishes, does all the work, and they get punished, and the other ones sit around and loaf and they get rewarded and they get more allowance, eventually the good kid is going to stop doing the dishes and participating.
Well, and that's what we've seen. We live in a federal republic. And so obviously the Californians that have been producing, when our crazy legislature is like, you know what, you guys aren't paying your fair share. We should tax billionaires on their assets, their unrealized gains, which will not just change the asset mix for them, but actually remove control from their own companies that they've built from the ground up, taking risks in living the American dream. They leave. They did.
Sure.
I mean, we saw it immediately, right? $400 billion of assets left California in under a month as soon as that prospect was announced, because they know that they're just crazy enough to do it. And that disincentive means that, Texas will welcome them. Tennessee will welcome them. Florida will welcome them, and they can move and will. And you won't find them stopping because America is not quite as crazy as California yet. But Ayn Rand's warning should be heeded by every American. When you look at California, almost 50% of our voting public is on government assistance.
Wow.
Almost 50%. We are one of the largest states in America, and depending on the year, we win that prize. And so imagine every state in America getting to that threshold. We all of a sudden are exactly where she predicted you would be. And of course, everyone votes in their own self-interest. And your own self-interest in this particular situation is keep the checks flowing. And so the politicians vote in their own self-interest because they built careers out of this, and that's how they stay in power. But also the public vote in their own self-interest. And we get these entitlement programs, they balloon out of control until the point where they are controlling everything across the board. And it is the definition of a society in peril. And that's what we're fighting against in California right now.
Yeah, we actually have, when you were on Fox News, there was a kind of a picture that was put up talking about the top U.S. counties by numeric decline from July 2024 to July 2025. LA County lost 53,934 residents. Orange County lost 8,520 residents. San Diego County lost 5,294 residents.
And not all residents are created equal. You have to have some resources to just up and move.
Yeah.
Correct.
That means you have the ability to get a job where you land. You have the ability to rent the trucks and to do the deposits and to move. It's like you're losing top draft picks and you're stuck with undrafted free agents. Like no NFL team is going to
make
thrive
that
like that.
even more clear, 100%. Just to drive some clarity to that. California, as a entitlement state, is a pretty good place to live if you're not contributing. So we actually have an influx of people who are coming in to join our government programs, our Medi-Cal programs, and our government assistance programs, our homelessness. We have people that arrive in California seeking the homelessness services that we are looking for. So we are importing net non-producers and we are exporting net producers. I also just want to mention that if those numbers look bad to you, look at the timing on that. July 2024 through the end of the year was Biden's wildest period of immigration influx, of which California saw the largest number of immigrants coming over the border. And so those numbers are actually muted. They are lower than the real numbers that we're going to see once we actually see the value of closing the border in this season. We're going to see an increase in that outflux from California.
Wow.
That is a great point.
Nick Shirley had a tweet. I want to read this here. California is trying to pass a bill that would criminalize investigative journalism with misdemeanors, $10,000 fines, imprisonment, and content takedown. The proposed bill is titled AB 2624. It was made after I exposed mass fraud and by immigrant groups in America. Under AB 2624, government-funded entities like the Smalley Learning Center, daycare centers would be protected from being exposed if they operated inside of California. So it has an image here, but then it goes on below that. It looks like your attorney general, Bonta, is like his wife is the one coming up with this.
Oh yeah.
A lot of times in politics, this is like this is a thing where we've run into. We're like, oh, when you find like Fauci, well, what's his wife do? Or like, there's almost always like
connected.
A tag team combo in this. And so Mia Bonta, kind of give us a little flow chart of political power in California. How does this work?
You bet. Well, Rob Bonta is one of the most powerful people politically in California because as many Democrats have understood for a long time, Republicans are just out here producing, building some businesses, hoping that somebody good is in power, watching over this for them, and hoping that the government isn't going to bother them too much. Democrats have built a career out of these lifetime politicians and politics, and they've done it because they've been groomed from a very young age, and they've been shown the pathway, and the door is open to them. Rob Bonta controls the courts. Functionally, he's in charge of all of the sheriffs in California. If they don't do their job, he could do it for them. He doesn't, but that is a potential piece of power that he's not even wielding. He has over 1,200 attorneys and also a budget to bill outside attorneys on his staff. The U.S. DOJ in Southern California, that has found more hospice fraud than Bonta, has 150 employees. Just by contrast, that's the size of these
1,200 to 150.
1,200 to 150. And their job right now functionally has been to punish the businesses, the billionaires, and the people of California. That has been what they've been focused on. Rob Bonta is an elected statewide office. Mia Bonta is in our legislature. And so she proposed the Assembly bill. The Assembly is our larger house, similar to the House of Representatives. And this bill would, as you mentioned, criminalize investigative journalism. Basically what they're saying is if an organization provides immigration support services, which hospice does, anybody who works with an immigrant of any kind, not just legal defense for immigrants, et cetera, is falls under this, that organization can report them to the state DOJ, and the state DOJ will then have the ability to push Meta or Google to pull down the content and then fine the investigator $10,000. So what the government is demonstrating is that they value protecting fraudsters more than finding fraud. And they're making a public acknowledgement that there is fraud in California to be found, and they are unwilling to go find it themselves. And that is, to me, it's not just un-American to violate the press. It's also completely unconstitutional to go after the First Amendment like this. It will never stand up in court, but they are outing themselves every step of this fraud investigation process and making it so evident where their allegiances lie. And so Mia Bonta obviously, would push more power to the DOJ to actually protect those that are being covered up in these fraud scandals.
Yeah,
we got to go after them.
And
the public pressure that we're putting on, thanks to Nick Shirley, by the way, the public pressure that we're putting on is working. They are sweating. They're having to pass the craziest law, and that says a lot in California. The craziest law that I've seen in California is this one. They are having to pass laws like this in order to protect themselves. And that public pressure, we are keeping it up. We're actually adding resources to it.
It's an interesting time with the internet age, because there's a famous meme from The Office. Like the guy's name is Jim or something. They would show him pointing to the whiteboard. They've done the one with Nick Shirley. Where he's pointing to the first, says, when you're finding fraud and someone yells stop, that's who's doing the fraud. Like this is
that simple.
They got the one with Elon Musk. Anyone who prevents fraud investigation is in on the fraud. Like we're in an era where everyone, it's not just the emperor has no clothes. We have video of it. The internet talks about it. Everybody knows. And then they pass laws to enforce that you got to say he's wearing clothes. And everybody knows he's not. Is that like the gig is up, but they just keep it going. And now they've enforced laws to keep it going. What was happening in secret. Once it's no longer in secret, it's out in the public. And then they demand that everybody keeps playing along with the scam.
David, what's so crazy about all of this is that we are in, they don't recognize this. We are in an era of accountability. And this isn't a Republican or a Democrat thing.
Right.
We want to know the truth as the American public. We want to know it. We want to know where the money goes. By the way, one of the craziest things that I found in this whole process is the Freedom of Information Act requests that are required. Why should I, as a taxpayer, when you're spending my money, have to ask you where the money went? It should be immediately public, everything except for defense. This is one of the things that I want to do in Congress, is to completely flip the script on who has access to all of the data where all of this money goes, because it will become immediately obvious who is protecting their own backside when that happens. But this is, we want it from, conduct, from personal conduct. You saw that with Eric Swalwell and his downfall.
Yep.
We have zero tolerance for this. Once we know the truth, we know what it looks like. We understand it. They can't bluff us anymore and telling us that they're going to protect us by hurting us. We actually understand what an abuser looks like. That's exactly what they're doing in California right now. And so we're on to them, and the public pressure that has gotten us this far is only going to keep ramping up, and we are adding eyes and focus and resources up and down the budget in California, because we refuse to let this moment go when the country is behind us. Everyone is. This is not I talked to a DSA candidate, Democrat Socialists of America. He's fighting fraud in Oakland, right? Like, because he thinks it's unfair that there are a few in the elite political class that are getting rich off of the backs of the poor. And it is unjust. It's not right. And so again, like we are, this is not a thing that is a political talking point. This is a what is right and what is wrong. And everybody knows you don't get to steal other people's stuff. The government washes that money through into entitlements. And that, that is a clarity that we need to help the American public understand. But this backdoor millions and billions of dollar fraud, everybody gets how wrong it is.
No doubt about it. It's interesting, as you were, pointing out, Nick Shirley, what it required an independent journalist to actually make this happen. How much responsibility do you think the media has for the coverage? Elon put up on X, he had a graph and it said for good reason, and it shows the American trust in mass media, how much it has declined. So I remember when President Trump came in and he kept calling them fake news, and really kind of drew everybody's eye to that, where it is fake news. But how much responsibility should they be taking for something like this?
Look, real journalism is only rewarded when it's massively explosive. To their credit, the story that broke on Swalwell was a real journalistic piece. It took work. It took corroboration. It took time. Most agencies are unwilling to pursue that. All they want is an angle on an angle. And when you get removed from the story, when all you get is an angle on an angle, then you're not actually doing any of the investigative reporting in the first place. And we have to leave it up to citizen journalists. I mean, on our DOGE team, we have over 2,000 tips that have been submitted by whistleblowers in 10 weeks from the state of California. So if we trust the legacy media to go and investigate those tips, maybe one would see the light of day. Potentially we'll get there eventually. If we do the investigation, if we manage that portion of it, and then we tell the media what we found, hundreds of them will cover our stories. We understand where the pressure points are and what we have to take responsibility for as citizens. And by the way, we don't get paid. This is an entirely volunteer gig in California. This is not a federal job. This is not something that is sanctioned. This is a group of volunteers who have said, I've got some skills. I've got some time. I'm going to make time. In fact, even if I don't have time, I don't have time. I'm running a company. What am I doing this for? Right. I'm doing it because we can sense that we're at this tipping point to make generational change. And if we don't do it now, then California will only get worse. People will only continue in their echo chamber of the decline, and we won't make the difference that we know we can make. And every problem I've gotten closer to in California, I just see, wow, we have not tried hard enough to push on this solution. And you see the pushing we're doing now, it's making a difference.
Well, let's talk about some of the numbers that you're coming up with, because just digging around a little bit at the things that you're uncovering. There's an environmental scam. It says 72 million of this money that was going towards environmental, like and these things sound so good. They're so good at packaging these things. Well, it's like, well, that sounds like a good thing that people get behind. 72 million went towards solar. 928 million of that package went to voter mobilization.
Yeah, let me talk about that specifically.
How is that possible? I think even the craziest, the leftist libs of TikTok crowd would be furious at that.
They are. That's exactly what I'm talking about, because they're mad that $1 billion didn't go out in free solar panels. Republicans are mad that $1 billion went out in the first place. So we do have some differences of opinion in that. But this was money that was captured by the cap and trade tax, which is put on polluters. It's part of our gas tax elevation in California, why we spend so much on fuel at the pump. And that money then was recaptured. And basically the way that they'll often make these, terrible programs palatable is that they say, but we'll give some good stuff back. And so they said, hey, we're going to give free solar panels. Well, the people that apply for those solar panels are affordable housing developers. They're wealthy. These are wealthy people. They are not the poor who actually live in those buildings, but the poor get some benefit from having free solar panels from the states because their power bills are lower. Well, what they were worried about at the state level is that the people who were living in the buildings, who represent a very large voter base, wouldn't know where the benefit had come from. And so under the guise of education, they doled out these solar panels to buildings, and then they sent an army of community organizers to every single one of the buildings to knock on all of the doors, to build relationships, to host potlucks, to have candidate forums, to make sure that everybody in the building knew that it was the Democrats in power, their assembly member or their congressperson who had gotten this done for them. And if they wanted more stuff like it, then this is the way that they would get it, is to come in and vote for them. We're talking ballot harvesting, and this is not a one-time, like somebody knocks on your door thing. This is you see them every month. And they become a trusted member of your community. So that's what the $928 million was spent on, was this voter mobilization. And not once did they endorse, support, or host a conservative candidate. Not once.
Wow. Okay.
That's like, it's like if Stacey's a busybody, she's a good worker, gets a lot done. It'd be like she cleans the house, does the dishes, does all this stuff, and like I emptied one of the trash bins in a bathroom and made a PowerPoint presentation about it and sat the whole family down to show them, my one thing. It's like it's
How valuable you are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look at what I did here, and it's like not moving the needle. It's not helping people, and it's leading towards a state where you're going to end up with billionaires and homeless. That'll be
Correct.
California's billionaires and homeless, or millionaires and homeless.
Yep.
Not
Well, the billionaires won't even be registered to vote anymore in California. They might have a home, but they're not going to operate their companies here. Where are their staff going to come from? They can't hire homeless people as their staff members. They need the America is the middle class. It's value for the middle class and the American dream and upward mobility. Education is meant to be, right, student training for opportunities that will build our future. And simultaneously, what we promise back in the American dream is that you will build your dreams too. Right. And we don't see that in California when you build these entitlement cycles that keep people in power. And this infuriated so many people because they said, wait a second, what did you say? We're paying more in gas tax in order to fund a program that fundamentally isn't doing what you told us it was going to do. And it's just keeping the people in power that rose our prices in the first place. Like, you've got to be crazy. We don't want to do this anymore.
Man, one of our slogans here at Flyover Conservatives is wake up, speak up, and show up. And you are somebody that is awake, but you are also speaking up and showing up in such major ways. Can you talk about, now you're running for Congress, talk about that, why you're running for Congress, and then, how we can help you in this fight?
Well, I had done some work on DOGE in California for about a year after they started at the federal level. And I said, hey, I think California's got an opportunity to make a difference here. I had no idea, by the way, how big the fraud circuits were in California. And so in January of this year, Steve Hilton came to me and he said, hey, I'm building an advisory board for a DOGE council in California. Do you want to be on the advisory board? And I said, no way, I don't do advisory boards. Let me run it. Give it to me.
Yep.
We announced on a Monday what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. I said, hey, we're going to do a government bloat department and we're going to do a fraud investigations department. Nick Shirley landed on Wednesday that week, and you've seen what's happened since then. Well, pretty early on, I realized that this battle that Newsom is having, by the way, the flip-flop I talked about on Fox News was that if it's good for him, he will take credit for finding fraud. And I've said from the very beginning, I don't think that Gavin Newsom has a political future unless he becomes the number one fraud fighter in California. So Newsom is a pretty slick talker. What he's trying to do first is just talk about finding fraud rather than actually finding fraud. The American public is not buying it. It's not helping his numbers. They see right through it. He's actually going to have to do the work, and we would work gladly with him. We'll work with anybody who wants fraud to go to zero in California. But I immediately recognized that we weren't going to get fraud arrests or punishment unless the federal government got involved. And then I started asking questions, how much of California's budget actually, flows out of California and then ultimately comes back. And the federal government is, a big payer in California for healthcare, for housing, for all of these programs. And Congress has done a terrible job of oversight, a terrible job of where this money should go. So that's how I got excited about running for Congress, is that I think we can make an immediate difference from the largest payer in the United States. Congress is the largest purse of money that we have in the United States, but we need reform there. And we need people who want to go to Congress, who don't want to live and die there. Right. Anything that I do in politics is worse than what I do in the private sector. It's all terrible. You get kicked in the face 100 times a day. But I can sense the value of it for our kids. I've got 3 boys. I want them to inherit a state that has no fraud. I want them to inherit a country where Congress has the backbone to cut off funding when somebody's not using it properly. And I don't know another way to do it except for to run for this position and kick the guy out who's been there. He's the guy who's there is a freshman congressman. He won by a couple thousand votes. We're just going to take those right back from him. And we're promising something for people. We're not just saying we're anti whatever. We're for more affordability, for better opportunities in schools, for clear accountability from your government. And that's what I'm offering the people of Orange County. And that's what I'm excited about with the run for Congress.
I love that. So obviously we have listeners from everywhere. You know, there's going to be some that might be in your area, but others that are listening, how can they help you? What is something they can do? How can they speak up and show up in helping you to make a difference in California?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you can donate to my campaign. That makes a huge difference because I am fighting against an incumbent, so I need resources in order to tell people who I am and what I can do on their behalf in Congress. Again, we have a ton of momentum on the campaign. It's very exciting, but we have a primary coming up in just a couple of weeks. So your support from anywhere in the country can help get the word out. In addition, if you know somebody that's in Orange County who would want to meet me, host an event, come and volunteer for the campaign. If you've got a smart kid that wants to help with something, right, from anywhere in the country, we have this amazing volunteer organization, and we would love your help, support, and connections. And I've been amazed at how many people actually know folks that are in Orange County and are happy to help. But in general, I think the other thing is just I think we all have to count the cost at some point and recognize that it's worth it. So the third thing that you can do, I'm actually working with the Heritage Foundation and other organizations that are working to set up DOGE in other states. This pattern that we're building in California is something that we want to take national because it actually needs to go all the way down to state legislatures and to local communities. And if you have a passion to get involved in that way, then I'd be more than happy to help you set it up because ultimately we just sign on the dotted line at the bottom of a blank sheet of paper and we say, yes, God, we'll do whatever you want us to do. And that's really what this journey is all about.
That is awesome.
I love it. Like a lot of times people will help fund a missionary going on a trip. It's like, I can't go put wells there, but I'm glad you are. And I can, hey, here's $10.
Right.
I can participate in what you're doing because I can't, but I can help, add some bullets, to your war here. So,
it means so much. It means so much to have the support of America behind us in California, because sometimes we feel like we're on this crazy island with these weird rules and why are we operating like this? And when America says, hey, we see you, we've got you, we're coming with, backup and resources, that means a ton in this war.
Oh, Flyover family, we've known Jenny for probably 5 years now.
We had her on the show, exactly, when we first started.
In this journey, she's a doer in her own right that doesn't have to do this, kind of like President Trump, kind of like others that are like, oh, man, I don't want to do this, but I need to. She's one of those kind of people. We know people have gone to church with her for years and can testify to her character. If you see these stories in California, you're like, that's so crazy. Donate $10 towards her helping stop it. Donate $100 towards help stop it. Some of you guys, you could do $1,000, to help her be able to stop it. She's like, think of this like a missionary in California that is boots on the ground to do the work that you're not able to do or willing to do or can do. She is there to do the fight. We need to support her and fund her to make this happen. And she's the antidote to the problems that we see. When you see the bad politicians, you see people that are doing this to make a career, make money. She's one that's one of the good guys.
She's a doer, for sure. And then also, again, praying. It's impossible to pray and for something not to happen. So knowing that there's been prophetic words that have been spoken over California of what God has planned. So we say yes and amen to those plans and come into agreement with what God is doing. And this is a great person to come into agreement with, no doubt about it. Go to JennyRayCA.com, JennyRayCA.com. Thanks again, Jenny, for your time. We really appreciate it.
If you had a time machine and you could go back to, say, 1930 and you had 1 ounce of gold or a $20 bill, both of those would buy you a complete men's suit, brand new, the shirt, the tie, the belt. Either one would buy you the whole thing. If you had a time machine and then you brought both of those resources into today, the 1 ounce of gold could still buy you a full suit at pretty much any men's store in America. The $20 bill, it probably only gets you a handkerchief or a pair of socks.
How do you get the gold and silver? Well, it's very simple. We have a friend that we've known for over 25 years. In fact, his dad was a mentor of ours, and his name is Dr. Kirk Elliott. And the way that you connect with him is you go to flyovergold.com. It's a website that we set up to make it very simple. All you do is go there, fill out your information, and someone from Dr. Kirk's team will get a hold of you to answer all of your questions. Whatever you have, they can help you out. Or you can simply call 720-605-3900. Again, 720-605-3900. 605-3900 to set up that free consultation. Do it today. You will be so glad that you did.
I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the inventor of the Wave Watch, the world's first frequency therapy watch. It features over 1,100 targeted frequencies. These sounds are acoustical and they move through your body. You don't necessarily have to hear it. So that's why we have so many testimonies for ADD and ADHD, emotions, headaches, joints, and so many more.
You heard the music. You know what time it is. It's time for an economic update with Dr. Kirk Elliott. Welcome.
It's always so great to be back with you.
Oh, it's great to be back with you as well. Excited to hear what you have to share today.
I'm going to talk about silver and where it's going. So a couple weeks ago, I think it was a couple weeks ago with y'all, we went over, everyone on the show has seen my projections. You know, I think we're going to hit triple digits by this summer, 200 to 300 by the end of the year. Well, we talked about what other economists are saying, right? Mm-hmm. So Citibank, Bank of America, Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and the list went on and on and on. And they're all kind of in the same ballpark as what I was, which was like, cool. Some of them even more. Right. So Bank of America, up to $309 an ounce by the end of the year. It's like, wow, that's Bank of America, not me saying it. Right. So one of my favorite researchers and all of the viewers here on Flyover land, they're going to know that I love Jesse Colombo's research, the bubble report. I think he's genius. Right. So he just did some research that came out last weekend. And, what did he say? So he said, I see gold reaching at least, not at most, at least $15,000 to $20,000 per ounce.
Woo!
And silver $300 to $500, with platinum, palladium, and mining stocks rising in uncommensurate magnitude. Now, platinum and palladium, yeah, they may rise, but I don't like them because they're too basically highly controlled by Russia. I don't want something that's controlled by Russia. They hate us, right? And so they could shut off the supply. They could do all kinds of weird stuff, and it's just a little too volatile and too risky for my blood. Mining shares, I don't like either because they're paper, right? And what do you have? Yeah, you could get a leverage pop by owning mining shares, but you could also get, what if the stock market comes down? You're going to get a tendency to just kind of, rise with the tide or lower with the tide. Mm-hmm. You could have management issues. You could have environmental restrictions on the mines. You could have a company that decides to dilute the shares. They could be using all of their profits to open up new mines, which means there's no revenue, which means our stock price doesn't do well. So it's just, that's too risky for me too, right? Which leaves gold and silver. Now, why does he say that silver is going to go to 300 to 500 and gold 15,000 to 20,000? Now, he's not saying by the end of the year. He did not give a time frame, right? He just sees that by the end of this is where these metals should be. Well, he's referring to his growth projections now at the M2 money supply. So anybody who basically read the book, Driving the Economic Summer, right? So what is inflation? Inflation isn't rising prices. That's a symptom of inflation. Inflation is nothing more than an increasing money supply. Because when you print money, you basically start treating it like monopoly money, and the rest of the world says, hey, America, you stink. You're printing way too much money. You're devaluing that currency. So we want more of that junk currency to buy goods and services.
Right.
That's why prices go up. It's a function of an increasing money supply. So now how do governments slow down inflation? Well, they can either raise interest rates or they can pull money out of circulation. Well, they're not going to pull money out of circulation, right? So the only option left to stop inflation is to raise interest rates. Now, this is where I think there's going to be a tendency to lower interest rates by the end of this year, because once oil is normalized because of the Iran conflict, they're going to want to lower interest rates, which is Trump's goal to stimulate the economy. But that's not going to work long term, in my opinion, because you've got too much inflation. They're printing too much money. Since 2023, M2 money supply has increased by $2 trillion. They've printed $2 trillion. Wow. And what is M2 money supply? It's like checking account, savings account, money markets, right? It's just the basic money that we would all use. That's a 10% increase during a non-wartime economy, which is when this happened. It's like almost unheard of.
Yeah.
That is a lot of money creation. Therefore, prices are going to go up, and there's going to be a policy initiative to slow down that inflation. That's either you're probably going to have to raise interest rates down the road, because this can't keep going on forever. But in the meantime, what does this mean for asset prices everywhere? They're going to go up. Our wallets will tell all of us that we have inflation. Look at what's happened to gold and silver during this 2-year time frame. This is my case here is last year silver was up over 140%, gold was up 70%. What happened to the M2 money supply? It went up $2 trillion in the last 2 years. So the price of metals is a reflection of what we're seeing with our devalued currency, because they're printing it like drunken sailors, right? So this is where Jesse says, yeah, 15 to 20,000 per ounce for gold, 300 to 500 for silver, because the M2 money supply is increasing so rapidly. And if I could trust any government to say, okay, let's use option B to slow down inflation and pull money out of circulation, then this is kind of a moot point. But they're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. They don't do that ever. They print money because they need it. And so therefore, because we live in an entitlement society, there's way too much stimulus, there's way too much money that needs to be created that tax revenues don't cover. And again, inflation is a hidden tax. You print money, it's still a tax. It's a hidden tax because it just reduces our bottom line.
He certainly isn't going to do it on a midterm year, where it could potentially hurt, Republicans.
Yeah. Dr. Kirk, you understand this better than anybody. One of your PhDs, your main focus was understanding how they calculate inflation. What is the actual process? You came up with a new method. The way I understand it, the best you could break it down for my tiny little redneck brain is the formulas that they use to even calculate what the cost of living is, the prices of things that go in a cart, the way they do that, and extrapolate that, or the way they manipulate that. That's your focus. Inflation is everything. It's crazy, the numbers. I see it everywhere we go. We just went this last weekend. We took our kids to see and grandkids to the Ark in Kentucky. We stopped at the Arch in St. Louis, and they give you the numbers like what it costs to build it. They did a renovation a few years. It was like 100 times more than the cost of building it. It's like, not because it was better than building, the arch that you can go into, which is an unbelievable, engineering feat. It's because the money has gotten so crazy. For our anniversary, we went to Las Vegas and saw the Eagles play at the Sphere. Well, every one of those shows that the Eagles did sold out like that. Well, why? Well, one of the Eagles is already dead. 2 of them are 78. There's a limited number of shows they do, and they weren't going to do any more. And so it was a fixed quantity. So when they sold them, the tickets sold out immediately. And there were no more tickets. Now, if they just kept printing more stuff, going to the Arch was easy to get a ticket because people can go anytime. I go to the Arch 10 years from now. That's kind of like inflation, a little bit, because the Eagles concert tickets were a fixed quantity. There weren't going to be any more. They couldn't open up more seats. It's a unique thing. If they all of a sudden opened up, we're going to do 100 more shows, the price of the tickets would go down. And that's kind of what the government does. It's like, hey, all of a sudden there's more money. Every time they do that, those things are impacting us in such a direct way. The only weapon that we have as Americans to fight against that, to sort of, turn our back towards that process is precious metals. It's our way of saying, you know what, I know this is happening. They're not going to stop. The only thing I can do to stop this, to protect myself, is be involved in something that can't be manipulated. That sort of is a stake in the ground against this kind of monetary weaponization against us.
I mean, it's a very simple concept. When things go up with inflation, everything does. Gold and silver are a thing. They're going to go up. Mm-hmm. So therefore, if you want to overcome inflation, if you want your retirement to grow, the only way to do that is to outpace inflation.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look at what silver and gold did last year. Silver up 147%, gold up 70%. Was inflation 100%? No. Even, I mean, government numbers are bogus ever since 1996 and the Boskin Commission that Clinton appointed, right? But unofficially, inflation's hovering around 12 to 15%. So did gold and silver do better than that? Yes. If you have money in a CD or a money market just sitting on the sideline, you didn't get 12 to 15%. That means you're losing. Loss of purchasing power. You don't want to keep that for very long. You have to outpace inflation if your retirement's going to grow.
I love it.
That's so
Flyover
good.
family, if you want to have a conversation about what are your options, how does this work? What do I actually get? Do I get do I get silver dust? Do I get a box of this? Do I get coins with a picture of Dr. Kirk on them? Or, how does this actually work? If you want to know about bullion, actual non-manipulative, necessary silver, and how you're going to store it, where you're going to store it, how much does that cost? Where do I get it? How does it, all of the things that you wonder about, just get your questions answered. And then you can hang up the phone, pray about it, see what you want to do. But have a conversation with these guys and make a wise choice that's tailor-made specifically for you. Somebody that can walk you through it, paperwork, wiring, everything you want to do that makes it stressful, and put yourself in a good position for the future. This is how you do it. Go to flyovergold.com. You can download a copy of this book. We talked about the M2 Money Supply. You want to know how that works? You get to download a copy of that there as well. And just put in your name and email and time zone when they can reach you and have that conversation. And then you got a relationship with someone who can take care of you and actually has your back. You sort of know a guy. You have a person in the industry that can walk you through this, not just to get it, but when to get out, what to do in the future, everything about this process. Remove the mystery, be engaged. It's like taking a trip with a Google map versus not. Know what you're doing, where you're going, what are the time frames involved. That's what these guys help you do. Go to flyovergold.com. Enter your information, screenshot this, whatever you need to do to be able to remember it later, but have the conversation, do the responsible thing, and make a wise choice about what you're doing.
Dr. Kirk, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Everyone is talking about this.
The one thing that's very important part of my portfolio all these years is gold.
Has gold hit all-time highs already this year?
And get a free info kit on gold today.
It's called silver. Gold coin.
And though we are thrilled that everyone is talking about investing in precious metals, a lot of these 1-800 numbers will make you feel like just another transaction. That's why it's crucial to work with a person, not a faceless institution, when it comes to your finances. You deserve to be treated like family, not just another number. Dr. Kirk Elliott, who we've known for over 25 years, he doesn't just sell gold and silver. He offers trust, care, and a personal touch that an impersonal institution could never match. So when it comes to securing your financial future, don't just call a company, call a person. Call Dr. Kirk Elliott at 720-605-3900 or visit flyovergold.com to learn more.
Do your feet ache and throb in pain with every step you take every day of your life? Well, kiss those days goodbye with slippers from MyPillow.com. How about that flimsy, flat little excuse for a pillow that's nothing but 8 hours of disappointment, causing you pain in your neck every single night? You can wake up with nothing but butterflies and rainbows around your head with a MyPillow pillow. Those hardwood floors hurting your old bones? No more with a MyPillow dog bed. Are your towels worn thin, flimsy, more patchy than Joe Biden's memory? There's nothing better than absorbent towels from MyPillow.com. For all of these products and more, go to MyPillow.com, use promo code FLYOVER for up to 66% off.
I'm Linda Bamber Olson, the inventor of the Wave Watch, the world's first frequency therapy watch. It features over 1,100 targeted frequencies. These sounds are acoustical and they move through your body. You don't necessarily have to hear it. So that's why we have so many testimonies for ADD and ADHD, emotions, headaches, joints, and so many more.
If you had a time machine and you could go back to, say, 1930 and you had 1 ounce of gold or a $20 bill, both of those would buy you a complete men's suit, brand new, the shirt, the tie, the belt. Either one would buy you the whole thing. If you had a time machine and then you brought both of those resources into today, 1 ounce of gold could still buy you a full suit at pretty much any men's store in America. The $20 bill, why, it probably only gets you a handkerchief or a pair of socks.
How do you get the gold and silver? Well, it's very simple. We have a friend that we've known for over 25 years. In fact, his dad was a mentor of ours, and his name is Dr. Kirk Elliott. And the way that you connect with him is you go to flyovergold.com. It's a website that we set up to make it very simple. All you do is go there, fill out your information, and someone from Dr. Kirk's team will get a hold of you to answer all of your questions. Whatever you have, they can help you out. Or you can simply call 720-605-3900. Again, 720-605-3900 to set up that free consultation. Do it today. You will be so glad that you did. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Flyover Conservatives podcast with David and Stacy Whited. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave us a comment below. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's podcast, share with those who came to mind. Be blessed and make it a great day.